Once there was a king named Saka. He was fair and just, but he had one very bad habit. He hated his daughter intensely. By God's grace, he first had a son named Abbas. Saka loved his son very much and raised him with great care and affection. A few years later, Queen Zara became pregnant again. The day of the birth was near, but Saka had to travel to another kingdom. Before leaving, he ordered Queen Zara, "I am going away, and if the baby is born before I return, if it is a boy, that's fine. But if it is a girl, kill her." Saka left, and a few weeks later, a baby girl was born. A mother loves her child dearly, and Queen Zara started crying, "Oh God, what should I do now?" At the time of the birth, there was a midwife named Neka who saw Queen Zara's distress. God filled Neka's heart with compassion, and she said to the queen, "Queen, do not worry. I will take the baby away in front of everyone, pretending to kill her, but I will take her to my home and raise her. If you can send some money for the baby's expenses, your daughter will be happy and well. Otherwise, I will do my best to raise her with what little I have." Queen Zara gave Neka some gold and silver jewelry for the baby and handed her over. It was announced in the palace that the midwife had taken the baby and killed her. But in reality, Neka took the princess to her home and started raising her with great care and affection. When Saka returned from his journey, he was told that a baby girl was born and had been killed as per his order. Saka was very happy because of his bad habit. Neka presented the princess as her granddaughter to everyone. Occasionally, she would secretly bring the princess to the palace, and Queen Zara would feel some relief seeing her daughter. The midwife, Neka, would give gold and silver to ensure the well-being of the princess, because the princess was being raised well and was growing beautifully. As she grew older, she became very beautiful and started to look like a royal princess, even though she was not recognized as one. One day, King Saka was passing through the city with his entourage. At the same time, Neka and the princess were also passing by. The king noticed the princess and asked, "Who is she?" The minister replied, "She is the granddaughter of this poor woman." The king then ordered, "I like her very much. Go to her house tomorrow and propose marriage on my behalf." Since no one knew the truth, the next day, the minister and other officials went to Neka's house to ask for her granddaughter's hand in marriage for the king. Neka was very worried and thought, "Oh God, what should I do now?" She refused, saying, "I am a poor woman. My granddaughter is not suitable for the king, and it is not right for the king to marry someone from a poor family. So please do not come to my house again for this matter." The king himself did not come, but he sent many people to Neka's house to persuade her. They pleaded, offered bribes, and even threatened her, but Neka stood firm and did not budge. Then the king ordered that Neka be arrested and punished severely, so that she would agree to the marriage. The soldiers captured Neka and brought her before the king. They started to beat her harshly, trying to force her to agree to the marriage. The soldiers beat Neka so severely that the poor woman, who was already very frail, could not bear the pain and screamed before the king. She confessed, "Your Majesty, she is none other than your own daughter. Instead of killing her, I took her to my home and raised her." King Saka realized that he was about to make a terrible mistake and that God had saved him from committing a grave sin. He became even angrier and summoned his son Abbas. He ordered, Take your sister to the forest and kill her. Bring back her eyes and the blood from her neck to prove that you have done it." Prince Abbas was distressed at the thought of killing his sister, now that he knew the truth. He knew that his father was determined to see his daughter dead, and that if he didn't carry out the order, the king would kill them both. Reluctantly, he took his sister to the forest. When they reached the forest, Abbas's love for his sister overwhelmed him. "I can't kill you with my own hands," he said. "I'll leave you here. Either the wild animals will eat you, or you will find a way to survive and escape." But his sister held his hand and said, "No, brother. Kill me and take my eyes and blood to show our father, or he will kill you." Abbas, unable to bear the thought of killing his sister or seeing her suffer, hesitated. His sister pleaded with him to do it, knowing their father's wrath. Both the brother and sister hugged each other and cried. Finally, the brother convinced his sister to go deep into the forest. With tears in her eyes, the princess looked back at her brother one last time before disappearing into the dense forest. Prince Abbas then hunted a deer, collected its blood, and took out its eyes. He presented them to King Saka, who examined the eyes closely in a mirror. When he was convinced that the eyes were the same color as his daughter's, he felt satisfied. Queen Zara, however, secretly called Prince Abbas and asked him about her daughter. Abbas told her everything that had happened. The queen raised her hands to the sky and prayed, "O God, protect my daughter. Keep her safe and lead her to a good place." Now, let's continue with the princess's story. The princess lived in the forest, surviving on wild fruits and plants. Over time, her clothes were torn by thorns and branches, and eventually she had no clothes left. One day, a king from another kingdom named Iz was passing through the forest with his entourage. By chance, he ended up near the area where the princess was. Hearing the sound of horses' hooves, the princess quickly climbed a tall tree and used its large leaves to cover herself. King Iz stopped under the same tree to rest, as it provided good shade. He tied his horse to the tree and laid down on a cloth spread out under the tree to take a nap. Since King Iz was looking up at the sky, lost in his thoughts, his gaze fell on something hidden among the dense leaves of the tree. He jumped up and shouted, "Creature of God, are you a fairy, a spirit, an angel, or a human? Whoever you are, reveal yourself. I mean no harm." The princess called out, "Traveler, I am a helpless girl with no clothes on my body. If you could give me the cloth spread beneath you, I will cover myself and come down to speak with you." King Iz picked up the cloth he was lying on, bundled it up, and threw it towards her. The princess used the cloth to cover herself well and somehow managed to climb down from the tree. When the king saw the princess, he was awestruck. There was no one as beautiful as her in his entire kingdom. He immediately fell in love with her and said, "I am a king. If you don't mind, I would like to marry you and make you my queen." The princess, seeing a chance for respect and safety, agreed. She too desired someone who would treat her with honor. The king, overjoyed, took the princess back to his kingdom. Upon reaching his kingdom, King Iz first went to the house of his prime minister and said, "Consider her as your daughter. Tomorrow, I will come to ask for her hand in marriage and take my bride from here." The prime minister, showing respect and understanding, replied, "Your Majesty, rest assured, she is your betrothed and like my daughter. Take her whenever you wish." The king left the princess at the prime minister's house. The next day, the officials arrived at the Prime Minister's house with the king's marriage proposal, and the Prime Minister agreed. A day or two later, the engagement was held. The king, deeply in love with the princess, sent out wedding invitations and soon married her, bringing her to the palace. King Ease and the princess were very happy with their marriage. During this time, the king never asked the princess about her past. Sometime later, the queen gave birth to a son. King Isa was overjoyed. He asked the queen, who was now the mother of his child, "Now that God has blessed us with a son, tell me who you are, whose daughter you are, and where you come from." The queen managed to avoid answering the king's questions. Years went by, and she gave birth to a second son. Again, King Eza asked her the same questions, and again she avoided giving a direct answer. Finally, when she gave birth to their third son, the king insisted on knowing the truth. The queen, unable to evade the question any longer, agreed to tell him. She revealed her story to the king, how she was the daughter of a king from another land, how her father hated daughters and ordered her to be killed, and how the midwife saved her and raised her secretly. She recounted how her father saw her, ordered her to be killed again by her brother, and how she ended up living in the forest until the king found her and married her. When King Ease heard the queen's sorrowful tale, he said, "Prepare yourself. I will take you to your parents' house." The queen pleaded with him, but the king was determined. "Please don't take me to my cruel father. He will kill me," the queen pleaded. However, the king did not relent. In the end, she reluctantly agreed to return to her parents' home. The king arranged for a grand escort with a large entourage, sending the queen and their 3 sons, along with his trusted minister, lawyer, and judge, while he stayed behind to attend to urgent matters of the kingdom. He assured them, "I will join you at the first, second, or third stop." The minister, lawyer, and judge set off with the queen and the large entourage. By evening, they reached the first stop and set up camp. The queen noticed that the minister's tent was placed very close to hers. She called the minister and said, "Minister, you know that I am the daughter of a king and the wife of a king. Please set up your tent elsewhere." The minister replied, "Queen, the king has entrusted us with your safety. If anything happens to you or your children, how will we answer to the king?" The queen insisted, "Nothing will happen to us, but please move your tent away." However, the minister refused. They ate and, being tired from the journey, went to sleep. The minister, harboring ill intentions, could not sleep. Finally, in the middle of the night, he entered the queen's tent. The queen had anticipated his bad intentions and was alert. Hearing the sound, she woke up and saw the minister. She confronted him. "You vile minister! You know I am the daughter of a king and the wife of a king. I have never done wrong or wished harm upon anyone. I am a creation of God. Leave my tent at once." But the minister continued to approach. "Don't disgrace me before everyone. Leave my tent at once," the queen pleaded. But the shameless minister did not budge. Seeing that the minister was not going to stop, the queen placed her eldest son in front of him and said, "I swear on this child's head, do not do this. I beg you in the name of Allah and His Messenger, and swear upon the Quran." But the wicked minister, completely overtaken by evil, drew his sword and with a single stroke beheaded the child. Realizing that the minister would not relent, the queen said, "You won't stop, will you? I am a pure woman. I am currently in a state of ablution. Give me a moment to break my ablution, then you may do as you wish." The minister agreed. "Go quickly and come back." The queen left the tent and ran away, hiding behind a large bush far away. The minister waited for a while and then went looking for her. He searched everywhere but could not find her. As dawn approached, he finally gave up, returned to the queen's tent, and buried the child's body far away. He then went back to his own tent. In the morning, the queen returned to her tent, and upon not finding her son's body, began to weep. The entourage continued their journey, and by evening, they reached the second stop. The servants set up the queen's tent. She noticed that the minister had set up his tent far away this time. However, soon she saw that another tent was being set up near hers. She asked, "Whose tent is this?" The servants replied, "It is the lawyer's tent." The queen summoned the lawyer and said, "I am a woman. Move your tent away from mine. This is not appropriate." The lawyer responded, "Queen, the king has entrusted us with your protection and the safekeeping of your belongings. He has insisted that if anything happens to you or your possessions, I will have to answer to him. I assure you, no thief can steal me or my belongings amidst this large entourage," the queen replied. "It would be better if you set up your tent far away." But the unscrupulous lawyer refused to move and set up his tent nearby. Already wary after the incident with the minister, the queen stayed alert that night. She couldn't sleep. In the middle of the night, she heard footsteps approaching her tent. She was fully awake. When she saw that it was the lawyer, she shouted, "How dare you enter my tent? Leave immediately." The lawyer, with his wicked intentions, ignored her and continued to advance. The queen warned him again. "You know, I am the wife of a king and the daughter of a king. I am a virtuous woman. Leave me alone and think about your fate." But the wicked lawyer was not deterred and slowly approached her. Realizing that the lawyer would not stop, the queen placed her second son in front of him and pleaded, "For the sake of this innocent child's life, leave me and go away." But the lawyer drew his sword and beheaded the second child as well. Desperate, the queen said, "If you will not give up your vile intentions, at least give me a moment. I am pure and in a state of ablution. Let me break my ablution, and then you can do whatever you wish." The lawyer agreed and allowed her to leave. The queen left the tent, running as far as she could until she hid behind a large bush. The lawyer waited for a while but then set out to find her. He searched everywhere but could not find her. As dawn approached, he realized the child was dead and the queen had escaped. He feared the consequences, thinking, "If the king finds out, he will have me executed in boiling oil." The lawyer, scared and worried, knew he had to cover his tracks. He returned to the queen's tent, buried the child's body far away, and then went back to his own tent. The next morning, the queen returned to her tent, found her son missing, and began to weep. The entourage continued their journey and reached the second stop by evening. Again, the queen noticed that the lawyer had set up his tent far away, but soon another tent was placed nearby. She asked, "Whose tent is this?" The servants replied, "It is the lawyer's tent." The queen called the lawyer and said, "I am a woman. Move your tent away from mine. This is not appropriate." The lawyer replied, "The king has entrusted us with your safety and the safekeeping of your belongings. He insisted that if anything happens to you or your possessions, I will have to answer to him." The queen knew she had to stay vigilant. She spent the night alert, fearing another attack. The lawyer hurried back, buried the dead child far away, and pretended to sleep in his tent. At dawn, The queen quietly returned to her tent and found that her second son's body was also gone. She realized that the wicked lawyer had disposed of it. With no one to trust, she wept and prepared to continue the journey. The entourage resumed their journey towards the king's kingdom. Now, the queen was alone with her remaining son, carrying the weight of her grief as she rode on a camel. At the third stop, the minister and the lawyer set up their tents far away from the queen's, ashamed and avoiding her. They were worried about how they would explain everything to the king. The queen noticed that another tent was being set up near hers. She asked, "Whose tent is this?" The servants replied, "It is the judge's tent." The queen called the judge and pleaded with him to move his tent away, explaining her fears. But the judge, like the others, was not deterred. That night was another torment for the queen. She stayed awake, knowing that the judge might also harbor ill intentions. Late at night, she saw the judge sneaking into her tent. She tried to reason with him, pleaded in the name of God and his messenger, and reminded him that as a scholar and a man of justice, he should not act like the others. But the judge, completely corrupted, ignored her pleas. Realizing that the judge would not relent, the queen placed her youngest son in front of him and begged, "For the sake of this innocent child, leave me alone." But the judge, more ruthless than the others, beheaded the child without mercy. The queen, desperate, said, "I am pure and in a state of ablution. Give me a moment to break my ablution, and then do whatever you wish." The judge agreed, and the queen left the tent. She ran as far as she could until she saw a large river ahead. Her heart was filled with sorrow, and she cried tears of blood. She thought, "What will I tell the king if he asks about the children?" The queen was torn between despair and the need to survive. The queen, filled with despair, decided it would be better to end her life in the river. With this thought, she jumped into the turbulent waters. The strong current carried her far away and brought her to the other side of the river. On the other side, 6 poor men were washing their clothes by the river. When they saw a woman struggling in the water, they quickly pulled her out. The queen, now completely disoriented and exhausted, felt as if the ground had been pulled from under her feet. Her mind went blank as she realized she had escaped from the vile men only to face another uncertain fate. Each of the 6 men argued, claiming her as their own. Finally, they decided to take her to their father, who would decide her fate. They brought her to their wise father, who immediately understood that she was from a royal family. He told his sons, "My sons, you are 6 brothers and have no sister. Make her your sister and take care of her. She will bring blessings to all of you." The 6 brothers were pleased with their father's decision and treated the queen with great care and respect. They became her protectors, and she became their sister. Meanwhile, 4 days later, King Isa rejoined the entourage. He noticed that the minister, lawyer, and judge were avoiding him and seemed ashamed. He asked, "Where are my wife and children?" In unison, they replied, "The queen was a witch. She ate all 3 children and then ran away." King Ez was shocked and troubled by this news. He began to suspect the 3 men but decided to address it later. He thought to himself, "I need to see my cruel father-in-law and ask him why he hates daughters so much." His cruelty turned his daughter into a witch who ate her own children. The king and his entourage crossed a large river via a bridge and continued on their journey. Meanwhile, the queen lived with the 6 brothers, who cared for her as their sister. she slowly began to recover and hear news from various sources. The queen soon realized she had reached her father's kingdom. Knowing her father had a great fondness for stories, she told her 6 brothers, "Tell the king that we have a sister who is an excellent storyteller. Ask if he would like to employ her as the royal storyteller." The brothers conveyed the message to the king, who granted them permission to bring her to the court, saying, "If I enjoy her stories, I will keep her as the royal storyteller." That evening, the brothers brought the veiled queen to the court. There was a curtain between her and the king. She began to tell a story, which the king enjoyed immensely. Pleased, he rewarded the brothers generously. They were delighted with the rewards and were happy to escape a life of begging. Every night, the queen would return to the court to tell a new story, receiving praise and rewards from the king, and then returning home to her brothers. This arrangement continued, freeing the brothers from the need to beg. One night, she saw that her husband, King Ease, along with the minister, the lawyer, the judge, and her father were all present in the court. She thought, "Tonight's story will be very interesting." Veiled as always, she took her place behind the curtain and addressed her father. "Your Majesty, tonight I will tell a special tale. If anyone has any urgent needs, they should attend to them now, for no one will be allowed to leave once I start. If anyone gets up, I will stop the story and never tell another." The king ordered everyone to agree, and they all did. She began her story. There was once a cruel king who did not like having daughters. When a daughter was born in his household, he ordered his wife to kill her. The queen continued her story, describing how the king's wife had saved their daughter through the midwife and raised her in secret. When the girl grew up, the king saw her and, not recognizing her, sent a marriage proposal to the old midwife. The midwife refused, and the king, in anger, tormented her. The midwife then revealed that the girl was actually the king's daughter. The king was shocked, realizing that the story being told was his own. To prevent the storyteller from stopping, the king threw a handful of jewels towards her. The princess, in disguise, threw the jewels to her brothers, the beggars, who were delighted. The queen continued, narrating how the king then ordered his son to take the girl into the forest and kill her, bringing back her eyes and blood as proof. However, the son couldn't bear to kill his sister and left her alive in the forest. She survived for a long time, her clothes torn and ragged, living a miserable life. As the queen told the story, the old king realized the extent of his cruelty and was filled with remorse. Tears streamed down his face as he listened. The prince, recognizing the story of his sister, anxiously threw more jewels towards the storyteller, urging her to continue. The beggars were overjoyed with the rewards, and the princess continued the tale. She described how a king passed through the forest, saw the girl, and took her to his kingdom, marrying her. The king, listening, realized it was his own story and threw more jewels, asking her to finish the tale. The princess continued, describing how she gave birth to 3 sons. One day, the king sent her with the minister, lawyer, and judge to visit her father. At this point, the minister, lawyer, and judge exchanged worried glances, recognizing their actions in the story. The king, eager to hear the end, threw more jewels. The beggars were ecstatic with joy. The princess narrated how the minister, with evil intentions, approached her and killed her eldest son when she resisted. The listeners were captivated, recognizing their own deeds being recounted. The princess, still veiled, continued her story, detailing the events of her journey. The minister, lawyer, and judge now realized they could not escape their guilt. The princess recounted everything that had happened, exposing the treachery and evil actions of the minister, lawyer, and judge. The king, filled with anger and remorse, now understood the truth. He stood up and declared, "This story is my own, and this woman is my queen." He ordered the immediate punishment of the minister, lawyer, and judge for their heinous crimes. The king and queen, now reunited, ensured that justice was served and peace was restored in their kingdom. The queen continued her story, describing how she barely managed to escape from the wicked minister who tried to violate her. She convinced him by pretending she needed to relieve herself urgently. The minister hesitated, but eventually allowed her to go, only for the king to scold him, "Sit down and be silent. How dare you make such an excuse now?" The minister reluctantly obeyed. At the second stop, the lawyer, with his vile intentions, also tried to harm the girl. He went so far as to behead her second son when she resisted. The queen once again managed to escape and hide. When the lawyer tried to excuse himself, saying he had an urgent need, the king again rebuked him. "Enough, you wretch. Sit down and be quiet." The lawyer, too, fell silent. At the third stop, the judge, forgetting all morality, tried to harass the girl. He even beheaded her third son. The queen once again preserved her honor and managed to escape. When the judge tried to make an excuse, the king silenced him as well. The queen continued, explaining how she was carried away by the river and found by 6 beggars who treated her as their sister. She told her story, and the king's eyes filled with tears, realizing it was indeed his daughter. Both kings threw heaps of jewels towards her, begging her to continue the story. The queen then revealed how she discovered she was in her father's kingdom. Knowing her father's love for stories, she sent a message through her brothers, asking if she could tell the story at the court. The king, eager to hear more, allowed her to come. As she reached this part of the story, her father, the king, was heartbroken and stood up with a cry. The queen removed her veil, revealing her true identity. Her husband, King Eza, also recognized her. Her father, overwhelmed with emotion, realized the immense cruelty he had inflicted upon his daughter. Both kings, filled with remorse and gratitude, embraced the queen. The 6 beggar brothers were richly rewarded for their kindness and loyalty. The wicked minister, lawyer, and judge were brought to justice for their crimes. The queen and her family were finally reunited, and peace was restored. The kings vowed to never let such cruelty happen again, and to cherish their daughters as they did their sons. The queen's tale not only reunited her family, but also brought justice and a new understanding of compassion and love to the kingdoms. The daughter and her husband were overjoyed to be reunited. They captured the minister, lawyer, and judge and asked them, "What punishment do you deserve? 4 lashes with the whip or 4 times the batori?" These were 2 severe forms of punishment in the Brahmi language. The men chose the batori punishment. The king ordered 12 horses to be brought. The men were tied to the horses, 4 in each direction, and the horses were driven in opposite directions, tearing their bodies into pieces. Thus, the wicked men received the punishment they deserved for their heinous actions. The princess's father was overjoyed to have his daughter back, and her husband was equally happy to have his wife. They all lived happily ever after